anyone gets motion sick, just be gentle. It's all good. All right, team, we are at 5:55. If someone could please monitor the waiting room and let people in as we can. I'm just talking to my committee here, please.
Yeah, I will do it. Got it.
And Fraser's monitoring the chat. But look, welcome back. Welcome back to Agile Auckland 2022. Woo! Okay, we took a little bit of a hiatus, and part of it was, I'd say, COVID, but a lot of it had to do with the moving and shaking in the committee, right? I think almost all of us switched jobs with the exception of Jim Buchan within like the last 6 months. And then, yeah, there's just been moving and babies and houses, and like we've just had a lot of stuff going on within the committee. So we appreciate you joining, and as we kick off our new season for 2022. We are looking for speakers for 2022. We'd like to focus on our local talent. And this is why we are starting with Joyous. They are a New Zealand company, and what the work they're doing is really inspiring. So we are looking to continue this theme throughout the year. If you have an inspiring story you want to share, please reach out to the committee. You can do it through our Meetup, our LinkedIn, and our email. So the Agile Auckland events at gmail.com. But we're looking for speakers, and we're also looking for committee members. We want to shake things up a little bit. Some of us have been doing this for ages. Marcella was just commenting, she's been in 2 years. I've been in 4. Jim Buchan has been in 15 years. So we love our partnership with AUT, but we'd like to see a partnership possibly with Auckland Uni. So I'm looking at you, Amanda. I know you're on mute, but I saw you join. So we'd love to possibly partner up with Auckland Uni. So, but if you're interested in joining the committee, it's really just forming, how the meetup goes and how it runs, and what are we going to focus on? It's a great group of people. So please reach out. All right. I'm going to introduce Ruby and Kevin from Joyous. I've had the pleasure of talking with them this week, and I've just, been looking at their stuff, this Joyfully book and their website and all the different things that they offer. They used all of their previous experience working in different organizations with different frameworks and came up with something that just feels right for Joyous, right? They're harnessing the employee feedback not only for their clients, but to inform their company, how their company operates. So we're very excited. So I'm going to turn it over to Ruby and Kevin. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Kevin and I sort of agreed a format for this, but we didn't overthink this. So just expect us to be reasonably casual and conversational, and forgive us if we're not perfect all the time. And yeah, I think the basic idea is that we'll introduce ourselves, tell you a little bit about Joyous, talk about kind of context and background, and then tell you more about the book and the method that Joyfully is, which is literally an alternative to Agile, although we never expect people to take it on wholesale. And then actually what's happened since we've published the book. And then we're thinking we'll do a breakout into 2 rooms, and then we can have 2 sets of Q&A and come back together. So yeah, Kevin, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I've been at Joyous kind of since the start. So when Joyous first started building out a team, went from founders to a team. Before that, my route into software was a bit crooked. I did a master's in AI, pivoted into baking full time, and then somehow found my way back into web development. Ended up landing at Joyous. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool ride, and going through and defining, I guess, helping define with Ruby kind of a new way of working in a very organic manner. I think has just been awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm co-CEO at Joyous, but really I'm sort of, I guess, what the traditional head of product would be, helping out with customer and data science and sales and marketing. But predominantly product was what I was doing at the outset and still am. And I also had a squiggly line. So initially studied to be a comedian full-time. And just in case that sets you up to think this is going to be a hilarious ride, I can guarantee you I have no good jokes. I only have mum jokes now. But yeah, realized that I wouldn't make a lot of money in comedy. And then it was like the early 2000s. I was like, I think this IT thing will be big. So I just randomly fell into IT, and it turns out that I actually legitimately love it. And so I was an engineer for a very long time, and then got shoved into product, which was a happy accident, and worked at a few places. And now I'm at Joyous with like-minded, awesome people like Kevin and a few others that are actually here to support us today too. So yeah, it's been a really awesome ride at Joyous, 2 years in for me, and stoked that Agile Auckland wants to hear what we have to say. So can't wait to share it with you. I think we're going to start by just giving you an understanding of at least what Joyous is, like what the company is about and what we do. And it's kind of interesting because it does affect us, and it affects Joyfully in some way, and how we behave. So I think it's useful context. So we'll spend a couple of minutes on that. I'm going to do that thing where I try to share my screen and hope that like the technology gods are with me today. Beth is clapping. Awesome. So I won't take terribly long on this, but really, so Joyous is a Kiwi tech company. We're in year 3, and we're helping seriously large organizations include their people in making change happen. And you'll notice that's a consistent theme for us with Joyfully as well. And the way that we do that in our product is that it's a two-way conversational feedback platform. It gives employees a voice, and we really care about ensuring that that voice gets heard. And that's a big thing for us. And I think a really good way to help you understand in this space how we're different from others who might think of themselves as our competitor is to tell you kind of the whakapapa, or the story of Joyous and how we came into being. So I'll just do the lightning version of that. And I'm going to take you all the way back to the 70s to when maybe your grandparents or your parents had a job. And I'm betting a lot of you on the call had a grandparent or a parent who had the same job pretty much their entire life, and they didn't change jobs. And maybe in the 70s, someone in an HR department decided that, yeah, we should just check if people are satisfied. That's probably a good idea. And so they did this big paper-based survey. It was completely anonymous, because this is in reality a time that if you said something wrong and your name was with it, you would literally lose your job, no doubt about it. That was just a given. And so this whole idea of anonymity was super important. Anyway, in the 80s, ArcSight came along and became popularized, but more importantly, academics linked the fact that employee engagement is directly related to profit. So guess what? Suddenly everyone cared a whole bunch more about employees being engaged. And out came the engagement survey. It got put on a computer because those were a thing now, but it was still this massive long thing, and your identity had to be protected in order for you to safely respond. And then let's fast forward a few more years, and people were like, oh, we can ask people these 64 to 100 questions more often. Let's do that. And so they just didn't do it annually. They started doing it quarterly or 6 monthly, or some people even more than that. And we call it a pulse engagement survey, but essentially it's pretty much still the same big anonymous thing. And so in 2015, our founders, who are also Curiously brothers, Mike and Phil Carden, kind of looked at this space, and both had really relevant backgrounds. So Mike Carden has done a successful exit in a previous HR tech company, which actually sold to Cornerstone On Demand, although he's a Kiwi. And his brother Phil has a background being an exec in a large telco. So he was an SVP at Alcatel-Lucent, which is Nokia, if you all know that name. And he had about 35,000 staff spread globally, and just really wanted a way to connect to them, hear what they had to say, and like take on board their insights and knowledge to affect his team and his division. But he couldn't, there was nothing out there that could do that. And Mike, on the other hand, with his knowledge of HR tech, really understood that like, nothing has changed in this space, and it's actually just, it's a huge opportunity, like something can be done here. And so they did a bunch of research, and as you guys in Agile will know more than most, decision-making processes and the way businesses work actually changed, and a lot of that was the advent of small letter agile or capital agile as you folks practice. And so this kind of like idea that like the only time you can give us your feedback is when you tell it to us in secret is fundamentally opposed to even just, if you think about it, the concepts of agile, really, where you're trying to have continuous feedback loops and retrospectives and all these things. And so in 2018, Joyous was born. And as Kevin said, he was there for the ride, as well as Lisa and Jay, who I think are both on the call today too. So that's quite cute. And yeah, the first open regular chats started going out. And so the big difference there is open, not anonymous, because it's a funny enough modern world, and Messenger exists and Instagram and all these other things where we all say whatever we think all the time with our name against it with no problem. And yeah, we don't do big monolithic surveys while we can, but what we really do is just small focused chats on one topic a week. And yeah, we're coming to know it more as agile feedback, or actually enterprise-wide feedback. So we don't just live in the HR lane. And the last thing I'll say before we get more into the book is that just this is the basics of how it works. We kind of take a big business objective, which could be an HR thing. Actually, a lot of our big customers here in New Zealand, shout out to Spark and Warehouse Group, who are two of our big agile practitioners. And they break down their big, most important business objectives, which might be HR related or agile related or customer related or growth related. And we help them break that down into really small conversation starters, which then goes out to all the team members, works on any device, and they can give their feedback at that point. And amazingly, their name goes with it. And funny enough, that has the effect of that feedback being a hell of a lot more constructive and useful, which is really good. And in case there's not enough context, we can route that to the right person, who could be, for example, a tribe lead, an agile coach, a product owner, traditional chapter lead, whatever you want, we can do it, or multiples of those. And amazingly, they can ask for more information or they can ask for ideas, or they can say, that's a great idea, just go ahead and why don't you make that happen? Or yeah, we'll take that on board. And so action actually just happens, not just measurement through this sort of two-way dialogue. And then finally, because it's this rich conversation, we can run our machine learning over that. And we also have analysts that help curate that. And the quality of our analysis and reporting, therefore, is super, super high. And also super fun to work on, because it's not the most well-solved problem in the world today to do NLP in this space. But yeah, that's the like lightning version of what we do as a product and a company. And we're super stoked with our progress, having customers here in New Zealand, Australia, and North America, where we have 3 out of the 10 largest telcos who we're lucky enough to work with. So that's that. I'll stop sharing my screen now and let Kevin do some talking.
Cool, thanks for that. Thanks for that. So yeah, I want to give a bit of context around the book before we dive into it, because it was a bit of a journey for us. We didn't expect to write a book at the beginning of last year, and not at the beginning of 2020. We didn't expect to, even a few months before we wrote it. So it was really, I think, quite an interesting journey. So why did we even create Joyfully? To us, a big part of it was defining what we already had. We'd kind of figured out something that seemed to work for us, and we wanted to take that time to think critically about it. So we were doing these exercises, thinking about what we had, how it differed from other things, what it was doing for us. And we were like, we're already doing the work. We may as well, write the book. So that was a big part of it. And then another one, and this is, I think we'll see as we go through the book and a lot of the things that we kind of land on, Joyous is quite geared towards a small team, and Joyfully is quite geared, a lot of it, towards a small team, because that's kind of what we joined Joyous for. We really love the impact that you can have, the energy in a small team, the culture of a small team. And that's what drew a lot of us in. So you'll find that there's plenty that's applicable across, but if you take the whole package, it actually does kind of end up a little bit geared that direction. The other thing is we tried a whole bunch of different things. And this is what we kind of ended up that felt right. We took bits and pieces from everywhere of what we tried, and we'll kind of go through that. And yeah, we ended up here. And we really value that approach and probably recommend it as well. Take the bits that work for you. So that's kind of what, even as we talk through this, is we want you to kind of think, what can work for you? What's maybe not going to work so much for you? And how can you kind of use some of that? Yeah, so I guess I'll take you a little bit through the journey before before Joyfully. So as Ruby said, started in 2018. Between 2018 2019, we kind of scaled from 5 people in a room to 20. And at that point, we were entirely founder and customer led. So we kind of built whatever the founders thought was a good idea, and big customers early in a startup said, hey, we want this, that, and the other. We kind of followed that to a degree. And in engineering, we did Kanban. We were we were somewhere between a 3 and 5 person team. It worked fine. We didn't need a lot of process around the edges. And then kind of 2020 comes around. This is where we really start to scale. And this is the point where Ruby joins the team at the beginning of 2020. So you want to talk a little bit about this year, Ruby?
Yeah, I mean, that was really interesting because I can remember meeting Lisa, who's Kevin's co-head of engineering, just in the interview stage. And like one of the first things we were speaking about is like, oh man, we really don't want to do Agile. Like, no offense to everyone here who loves Agile, but Agile is as good as, I guess, the people that you do it with to some extent as well, and how much people buy into the values and the philosophy. But for me personally, having done it for many, many years, I was a little bit tired of story points and sprints. And so like, I just wanted to find, oh God, I hope I haven't insulted you. Please love me anyway. We just wanted to find something, honestly, that was a little bit more fun to be a part of. Like, our goal with Joyous is that, like, we want to create a company that has a way of working that we never want to leave. Like, we just want to stay here forever. Oh, thank God, I'm in a safe space. That's good. Thank you very much, Frege. So yeah, it was a beautiful conversation with Lisa. And even at the interview stage, I was like, oh, there's this thing called Shape Up. And I don't know how many of you are aware of Shape Up from Basecamp. But I was at another company called Ask Nicely, and we were busy implementing Shape Up over there, or giving it a go. And Lisa just immediately started reading the book. And so, yeah, that was really interesting. And Kevin as well, definitely on board with the idea of, well, let's find something that's like feels really good to be a part of. And so I guess I would just say that was around the point, Kevin, that we didn't really jump into methodology so much. We were trying Shape Up, but we were kind of more focused on our org structure and getting that into place, because we've done some really interesting things there, which we'll actually tell you about, and getting aligned, like moving away from being just customer and founder led. And before you can do any of that, really, I was doing heaps of research on strategy and what the right thing would be to build. Yeah, would you have anything to add to that, Kev?
Yeah, so 2020 was kind of our year of pretty big growth, going from, I think, what makes a reasonable engineering team of 5 people. We ended up the year with 12. At that point, you're having multiple things going on. You need a bit more structure around it. Product really became a function with Ruby coming in. And yeah, as she said, a lot of strategic alignment happening. And so this is kind of the year where everything gelled, and it's kind of at the end of this year where we actually went ahead and wrote the book. So yeah, do you want to give a brief overview of like what we're going to talk about, Ruby?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I would say, like, we got to like 6 months down the line with Shape Up, and I don't know how many people here have played around with Shape Up, but we, like, just like with Agile, we just hit into some hard problems with it that like didn't work for our particular context. So much like Joyfully works great for us, like you might run into that sort of thing if you tried another methodology. So some of their things like betting tables and breadboards, as a for instance, didn't work very well for us. And so that's probably the point, right, that we just started freestyling. And like, I wouldn't really honestly say it was deliberate, like, oh, we're going to come up with something. We just kind of started doing things that felt better, eh?
Yeah, we were just like, we need something that works. This isn't working, so how do we adjust it so that it does work? Yeah.
So in terms of like, we didn't want to be too boring. And so we'll just not talk too much about the actual sections of the method, but we think what's more interesting is actually that stuff around strategy and alignment and relationships and team structure. And that's kind of a space I think we're doing stuff that might be slightly inventive as well. And so yeah, what we'll just briefly take you through is our strategy and alignment, relationships and team structure, and then we'll briefly show you the actual method for defining and designing and building features as we've done it in Joyfully. So this first section of the book, so the book's divided into 3 parts. We really first talk about strategy. So why do you need a product strategy? Like if you ask some product owners or product managers or directors of products or heads of products, all the titles, like how do you form a product strategy? Surprising how many people aren't sure. And it's surprising how many businesses are customer led. So basically the priority is do whatever the customer who's jumping up making the most noise is telling you to do, or the biggest deal that's about to come in. Yes, you just agree to every feature they want to close the deal, that sort of thing. And for those of you working with internal stakeholders, it's just whichever ones of those have the most sway or the most senior that's really controlling your roadmap. And so why do you need a really good product strategy? For us, it's like, well, you want killer product market fit. You really want to be unique if you can. And a good strategy is agreed and it's documented, and it sort of really arms that team to sort of achieve the goals. So I won't go into the way I did it in great detail, but I'll tell you the 10 steps just quickly, and they are explained in great detail in the book if you want to read it there. And I just want to, like, massive disclosure, like I know there's some, like interestingly, Anthony Marta, some people here who are pretty good at product strategy, I imagine. So like I'm not saying this is the perfect way, this is sort of the way that I've done it, which is it's really important to define your ICP, so your ideal customer profile, and be really clear on that, because so many times I've seen like people trying to serve 2 very different types of customers, and then in the process of trying to please everybody, you please nobody. And so I think having a really clear definition of what your ICP is, like and various characteristics about them, because we're enterprise, it's like size of organization, geographic location, industries, and so on. That's how we sort of define it, and that helps us narrow our focus. The other thing is to be really good at really knowing your worth. So what's your product worth today? How many users do you have? How much money is it bringing in for you? That sort of thing. Get across your product usage. So really understand all sorts of metrics. We have 5. I won't go into them, but a common one is, how often monthly active users are people using your product. Then a big one is getting feedback. I used to be one of those arrogant product people that was like, I don't need to talk to people. I know what's best. I'll just put what I want in there. It's not the best way to do product. Turns out I was only right 50% of the time. I really, really value feedback from every angle. I actually spent my first 6 months at Joyous right at the front with the customers, so helping to implement new customers, helping to sell customers, understanding the landscape there, and then did a lot of retrospectives and conversations with the team. I worked really closely with prospects to understand the gaps. I did really hardcore gap analysis of the markets, of the competition, not just their features, but like where they had traction and where they didn't, so that we could identify gaps potentially, all that sort of stuff. Did a good old fashioned SWOT analysis. And then from there defined the vision, goals, and objectives. And another good, by the way, set of people I used for feedback was actually industry experts in related industries. So that was a really good thing to do sort of towards the end. So from that, I had enough to define a vision and goal, some goals for that and objectives for that, and presented that just over and over and over again to all the relevant people, first internally, and then I went broader until it was crystal clear and we could get it down to like 3 basic points. And that's sort of the process there. And the learning is like, it's not a one-off exercise. It's something you should be doing all the time. Keep revalidating that, researching it, and don't be afraid to sort of change direction, because that happens actually quite a lot. At least year on year, where things change, and that's okay. Yeah, and then I guess the next point there is on once you have that strategy, and it's kind of pointless doing anything unless you've got the right strategy in place, because you're probably building the wrong thing, if you want to think about it that way. So the next thing is, if you've got a strategy, like how did we get aligned? And I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that, Kevin, or if I should keep going.
I think you keep going. You're on a roll.
Oh, damn. This seems to happen regularly. Anyway, so, I mean, it was real interesting in a way, right? Because I joined and like Kevin said, the engineers were building something that was really important for us to scale, a part of the product. Both the founders, the brothers, had ideas for things they wanted to have in the product that wasn't the same. And then I came along and I had all this research, and suddenly I was like, this is what we're doing. And then I was like, oh, hang on. like, oh no, oh, we're not aligned. How are we going to get this sorted out? And then we got to this point where we formed an understanding that there was a single agreed roadmap, and that was really important, and an agreed set of people who had to all buy into what that roadmap was. And that's nothing new and fancy, but on its own, it also didn't work. And so the thing that we realized was missing was what we call a negative roadmap. And the problem is, you might think everything is fine and dandy and you've agreed what you're doing at a strategic level, and for some of you it's at a sprint level, but I mean, doesn't it happen every time that just as you get going with something, someone comes along and goes, oh, but actually, can we also just quickly add blah, blah, blah. And so the mechanism that we have to solve for that is called a negative roadmap. And so even at our strategic planning level, it's the important things that we really also should be doing, but we just realistically don't have the bandwidth to do it. So it's not a backlog. We don't, like, the next time around, shift things up in priority. It's the things we've said, we're not doing this. Next time we plan a positive roadmap and a negative roadmap, they're both fresh. And so that was really game changing for us. And I think the other two things that were game changing was agreeing that we will never sell on features. So we do not sell anything other than the tool that we have. We don't even sell on the roadmap. So we only sell the product we have, and that allows us to focus on that roadmap, and it allows the engineers to build real quality code and not have to rush. And then, yeah, we use Joyous ourselves. So that's pretty important too, I would say, on that front. And now I definitely will make Kevin talk next, because the next part, once you've got the product strategy and you've got alignment at the senior level, is you got to start thinking about, okay, now we've got to get going. But before that, over to you, Kevin.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, we've got this great strategy. We know what we're doing. We know what we're not doing. And I guess in a way, unified engineering, this to us is kind of our engineering strategy. So kind of the overall idea of how should engineering be operating before you even get into what is it going to do? Like, what is it specifically going to be delivering? And we kind of coined this term, unified engineering. This is actually between myself and Ruby. There's a number of terms throughout this book that we're like, what do we call this thing? One of us explains the idea to the other person, and we're like, not really sure. And we tried a lot of different synonyms. So this is one of those coined terms. But really the idea here of unified engineering, the real goal is that you have this strategy, you know your priorities, exactly what they are. How do you make sure that you can map your engineering resources directly to those priority items in the priority order that they are? That's usually a really hard thing to do in engineering, because so often engineering is really split out. It's split into, you have different teams that have ownership of different parts. And then even inside those teams, you have, front end and back end, you have DevOps somewhere. And you go, okay, well, actually we have this one, strategic item that's super high priority to us, but it only touches like this tiny piece of the code base over here. And so really the only people that can work on it are maybe these 4 people. And maybe we need to really aggressively hire in that area. And so to us, it's really like, no, we want to be able to map. We know exactly what we want to do, assuming we did the strategy part right. We know what the priority order is. So it's like, we want to be able to just map all of our efforts directly to that. So that's kind of what unified engineering attempts to do, attempts to achieve. And so it's kind of 4 parts to that. So the first one being shared ownership. So there are no silos within Joyous engineering. All engineers are able to work on all parts of the code. You don't have to be an X team or Y team in order to touch that thing. You can touch that thing. There's also then building on that, we have a shared understanding of the code base. It's very hard to work on something you don't understand. So we try to make sure that all of our engineers are actually familiar with the majority of the code base. This makes it actually possible for them to be productive in those pieces. But this is really, you think about it, you're like, a code base, it's so huge. How can everybody have an understanding of the majority of it? This is kind of where the next 2 things really come in. That first one of a shared set of tools, a shared set of standards and practices. For us in Joyous, what that kind of looks like is we really want the code to look the same in the front end as in the infrastructure. We want it, wherever you're writing your code, it looks the same. And so for us, that means full stack TypeScript. So on the front end, we're TypeScript, we're with React. In the back end, Node, also TypeScript. Our CI/CD is in TypeScript with GitHub Actions. Our infrastructure is in TypeScript with Pulumi. All of our scripting that ties things together, that's all TypeScript with Node as well. And we have one set of configurations, one set of standards, one set of practices. So it doesn't really matter where you're in the code base, it looks the same. And this really helps with allowing people to gain that understanding, allowing people to do that ownership thing. And then the last one, and again, this is critically important to actually letting these first three happen, is that you simplify that code base. You make sure you're only building on the business logic as much as you can. If there's a service for it, take it on. Don't build it in-house. Use as few tools as you can. Use as few variation of things as you can, just to make sure that you can actually have a productive full stack team. A productive full stack team, the more complexity there is, the more variation there is, the more difficulty it is to actually make something like this work.
Awesome. Am I moving to the next slide? Sweet. I'll talk about this one a bit. So technically, originally the cat and the dog was myself and Lisa, but like, I don't know if like now Kevin is a second dog, but like think of this as like a visual for the entire of product and engineering. I'm not sure if Lisa's with us because I know she's looking after her child at the moment, but I really wish that she was, because this is kind of the cute love story of Lisa and I. And oh, there she is.
But I'm here.
Hello. I'm so glad you're here. And so it was really interesting because when I started, Phil, who's one of the co-founders, made it really clear to Lisa and I, what did he say? If there's one thing I need the two of you to do in the next 6 months, it's for you two to form a partnership. If you do nothing else, if you deliver no feature, I don't care. I just want the two of you to think of yourselves as part of one partnership. And so we took that to heart and we went to lunch all the time and expense claimed it. But really what we were doing is that we were building that kind of real tight relationship. And I think that's probably the single most important thing we've done. Like having worked at other companies, there's always such a big tension between product and engineering. They don't feel like one group. It feels like engineers always want one thing, product always wants a different thing. And it's kind of like the roadmap is like, it's a battle like for like who wins. And we kind of took a different approach to that. And it takes time to build these kind of partnerships and relationships. And it took us time. And I mean, even just now, it's the start of the year, and we've just done this first round of our strategy and our positive, negative roadmap sessions. And I just had such warm, fuzzy feelings afterwards because we're so united on what's important and how we're going to help support each other to get to those goals. And like, we just have so much trust. We listen to each other. We treat each other with kindness and empathy. We have each other's back. There's no engineering team and product team. It's just product and engineering. And it's like the most wonderful thing I've ever had the privilege to be a part of. And like, if there's one thing that you could take away, if you could build that bridge and that relationship throughout the whole team, you know, it's not just Lisa and I, it's everybody across the whole team, every engineer, every full stack product person, we're all like that. And it makes all the difference, I'd say. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add, Kev, Lisa?
I mean, it's just, yeah, that we're all trying to achieve the same outcome, and working together, being aligned, trusting the other people that they're pulling in the same direction. It's a much nicer way of working and a much more efficient way as well.
Cool. So then just to give you a context on, I said we did some interesting things with org structure, and I'm sure a lot of your org structures look something like this, maybe not exactly like this. And just bearing in mind, I'm just going chapter, I'm going to touch the Agile hierarchy because that's impossible to fit on a slide, right? But if you look at most traditional companies, this is not that atypical. And maybe we're not big enough to justify this, but if you're looking at the picture, it's really hierarchical. There's some big giant head right at the top, cult of a single personality style thing, and then everything goes down from there. Whole bunch of middle layered people. Sorry if some of you are on the call, and then just the people doing the work at the bottom. And so in the end, you've got like these 7 layers in your cake, your org cake, and then like 12 slices, which is a lot of silos like Kevin was talking about. It's a lot of specialists and huge amount of complexity to sort of move things through an organization like this. And so I thought I'd show you kind of where we were at the time we wrote the book. And so this is what you'll see in the book. This is our equivalent. I'll just go back and forth. Ta-da! It's quite amazing. I'm very proud of this. So is Kevin and Lisa and everybody else, because we love it. And there's a couple of things you can see there, but I just will like deliberately point them out because that's my style. So first of all, our most senior leaders are at the bottom, not at the top. So our CEOs sit right at the bottom of the organization, and there's more than one of them. And so we call that collective leadership. Which is a big thing to us, and it allows us to reduce the number of layers in our organization. So rather than appointing someone as a leader below you, why not put them beside you and have them be your partner, much like how Lisa and I became partners across functions. And then also the broad capabilities thing, which you see at the top, which is not only do we have full stack engineers, as Kevin described, but we're not sure if anyone else has ever done this. We've not heard of it, but we have something which we call full stack product, which I'll talk to you about in a minute as well. But yeah, since this, we put in the book that this was what we thought would happen in the future. And so it turns out we are psychic, because we're very close to this. The only piece we're missing is this extra co-head of product. But yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this part, or if we should just keep going, Kevin.
I'll just add a little bit. Yeah. So, I mean, the collective leadership is a huge one. It adds, less levels. I mean, that's a big one. Ruby's been pointing that out. It also adds less stress to the individuals that are doing the roles. Contrary to popular belief, I believe it actually produces better decisions because you actually have various viewpoints. And as long as, again, you're aligned on what that goal is, what you're trying to achieve, I think having someone to bounce something off of, to me, really, really helpful. Yeah, the partnerships, I mean, those are kind of across, and that just keeps the alignment really strong, which means that, we really have those meaningful outputs, and we make sure we're always pulling in that direction. And then the broad capabilities, it's kind of a little bit of what I talked about at the beginning. It's like this, we're trying to keep the startup team. That's how we enjoy working. That's how pretty much every startup starts. You have to wear many, many hats because there's not that many of you. And then we're like, well, can we just keep that going as we grow? We like to work that way. We think it's an efficient way of working. We've seen how much output you can have doing it. Can we grow that?
Such a good point. Yeah, and that reminds me as well, like Kevin and I are both good examples of the rapid learning that this sort of shared leadership enables, because both of us were appointed as co-s, so me co-CEO and Kevin co-head of engineering, because we have gracious people like Lisa, who was the original head of engineering, and Mike and Phil, who were the original co-CEOs, who decided not to give us titles below them, but wanted us to come and sit beside them. And so my own experiences in the last year since I've become co-CEO, holy Moses, like who gets to learn to be co-CEO with two experienced CEOs each side of them? It's crazy how much I've learned in such a short time, and in such a much less stress than I imagine it would be to have to figure that out on my own and without partners. So hugely recommend opening organizations' minds to this concept. Just so good for the stress levels and the energy and the work-life balance of the people involved, as well as succession planning, if you think about that from a risk management perspective too. Cool. So moving on from that, just because I love full stack product, I thought we'd talk about that a little bit. And I know one part that at least I know one other company has adopted, which is run.io. But like Kevin said, it was originally kind of born out of necessity. So I was the first and only product person, and I happened to be able to do all these roles. I'm really so if I could do just one thing and nothing else, my real passion is design and UI and UX, just in case that's interesting to anyone. And so I have for a long time been like having design people report to me. And this time I was like, I actually just want to build a really good design system and have really good UI UX practices, get really good at Figma, which is the tool we use, before I bring some other people in. And then I was doing the product management, and I got really close to the customer. And at a point we were just like, was incredibly efficient. Like if something happens at the customer end and you need to get it to the engineers and out the door, well, now there is not 9 people you have to work your way through, or 6 people to get something from A to B. It's just, you can just do it in one. And so, yeah, I was full stack product person number one. And you might think, well, holy Moses, who else could do that? Well, the second person we hired was Chris Holdaway, who's sort of my work soulmate. And he came with more the pure product management background, but he stretched. So we had this idea that over time, he just started looking at my designs and giving feedback. And then he got curious and started building a design system. And we have some strict things that we do to make it possible for more than, creative designers to be able to do this, like really good following material UI design guidelines, being really strict with the design system, only just tweaking it for our brand and nothing else. And yeah, he stretched gradually over 6 months, and now he can design right beside me. And so we'll often just hand off work at 50% and we'll work on things together, which is amazing. And now we have 2 others stretching as well. And people come in at different points. As long as they've got the desire to stretch, we want full stack product people. And so if you think about the maths there, we've got 4 versus 4 times 9. Which is really great, and we can help all the way from the front to the end. So that's all I'd say there. And some of the benefits of that, in case it's not obvious, is that we have way better outcomes for our customers. We have faster outcomes for our customers. We have less misunderstandings. And the interesting thing about putting ourselves right in front of the product is so often product and engineering teams are far removed from their product. And they have this sort of like wall of customer people protecting them, the customer success people, or whatever you might call them, customer care people, who really suffer the pain of whatever your customers are struggling with, but it never really hits you as a product person. And so I love the fact that we push to the customer ourselves, because it's nothing like being on the firing line yourself to motivate you to prioritize something really important and to make sure that customers looked after. And we also applied a product mindset to customer care. So we codified every process we could. We made it repeatable. We made it as efficient as possible. And in fact, now we are building that into the product. So guess what? We won't need a whole bunch of customer success people long term, and that'll help us stay efficient in another way too. And so moving on, this is yours, Kev.
Cool. So yeah, engineering crews, I guess this is a full stack product, kind of how they align themselves. This is a bit how we do it in engineering. We've grown quite a lot. We started this is again kind of just trying to repeat what worked really well for us at that beginning stage. When we were just starting out, we were getting a lot done. We're like, okay, cool. So when we were a team of 3-4 engineers, we were absolutely cranking through stuff, and we'd all just collaborate together, and we figure out what it is we need to do. We'd make good decisions, and we build an end-to-end piece of work. So we're like, can't we just repeat that? Let's do that again. And so that's kind of what an engineering crew does. This is another term that we coined, and again took a lot of different synonyms, because we wanted to be a bit different. We didn't want to say team, because we think of engineering, all of the engineers, as being part of one team. We didn't want to say squad, because we feel a lot of times squad means you're siloed, or you own a portion of a code base, or you're going to stay together for a whole long time. With engineering crews, we don't stay together for ages. So because we don't want people to be siloed, we want that knowledge of the code base to be spread. An engineering crew only exists for about 6 months at most, and then those swap around, and that means that whatever feature you're working on, there's people that have worked on that before. You don't kind of get siloed knowledge. You get to learn from everybody else. It's been really, really beneficial for the folks working on it, as well as kind of what we've been able to deliver. And yeah, at the same time, also being able to we take as a crew a roadmap item. So what Ruby was talking about, we do these really high level roadmaps, and then we take one of these pieces and we give it to a crew, and the crew has quite a lot of autonomy within that. Obviously we have those codified standards and practices, but within that, actually how you solve that problem between product and that crew, they work together and they figure out how that is. And that lets the engineers kind of run that whole, software engineering lifecycle. And yeah, it's back to that kind of startup mentality, being able to deliver things quickly, being able to touch all of it, and being able to be really, I guess, for lack of a better word, agile as things inevitably change, as you need to make decisions and changes while you're working on something that is a bigger piece of work.
Awesome. And so I guess that brings us close to the end of the joyfully part of the pure book part of the talk, but this is the actual method, or like the process that we flow through. So we've got that roadmap, right? We take that roadmap, which is a positive roadmap. It might have like a single, like 1 or 2 word description of a top line item, and that will be broken up into features that we need to get a first release out, which we try to be really, really lean on. And then there's features that can wait. And so on a 3 monthly cycle, we'll agree that positive roadmap that has those 3 big items in it. And we'll slice those into those features. And then we'll take a chunk of them and we'll frame them out. And when we say we'll frame them out, we actually do that in Figma, in frames, in Figma, which is all this. We are very, very explicit in the book about exactly how we do every single one of these things with the tools and our approach, how we work together. So if you're curious to see the details, you totally can. And then we'll design the solution. Usually product people will pair. We don't like to do anything at Joyous alone, same with the engineers. And then when we're ready, we'll start getting through comments in Figma asynchronous feedback. And once that's all happened and we've resolved as much as we can, we go to what we call a mammoth meeting, because it's mammoth because we invite the entire company. Imagine if you guys did that. How productive would that be? And it's interesting because the first time we did a mammoth meeting, I remember Mike and I went down a horrific rabbit hole about something, and annoyingly it turned out he was right. And that took us 20 minutes to resolve. But then we got really very good at moving ourselves through making decisions in that meeting, because we have a nifty little decision-making process, which is reasonably democratic, which we list in the book as well, if you want to read it. And then a simple way of describing the map of what we need to build, which is almost like a pre-handover point between product and engineering. And then at some point, group architecture happens. And I don't know if you want to take over from here, Kev.
I probably won't go too deep because we're running pretty heavy on time, but yeah, it's all in the book. Do read it if you're more interested in those kind of niche pieces. But yeah, the process, I mean, it really works well for us. There are a fair few steps, but also we flex this a lot. We flex these steps. We change them as necessary. You know, on a smaller feature, you don't need a whole bunch of architecture. You might not need a mammoth meeting. On a technical task, you might not need that design stuff. And we're happy to be kind of open with that. We just kind of have, okay, here's generally the blocks that we go through, and we choose what's most appropriate for the pieces we do.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess at the end of it all, we kind of, at the last step of the book, and incidentally, for context, I think that book took about 6 months to write. So it didn't happen overnight, and that's largely because it was in our spare time. And the book itself actually helped us shape the process. So like throughout the journey, as we came to write the book, which originally we were thinking is a really good guide for other people who join us, to be really clear on what our process is, it kind of actually helped us identify, well, this is really not clear on what we're doing here or why. So let's write that down and let's flesh it out a bit more. And let's talk about the benefits of this so that anyone else who comes on board has like an explicit understanding, if they like, from day one of like what we're doing and why we value it, and like where it's come from. And so at the end, one of the last things we put together was our principles, which is not at all a nod to the Agile philosophy. It's ours. And yeah, we won't go into detail in this again. And this isn't actually right in the front of the book, what these mean to us, but they do reflect everything in our culture that really underpins making something like joyfully possible, and making it possible for it to work well. So I guess in the interests of moving on, I might just leave it at that and like really encourage you all to go and download the book, which is free. And even though it asks for your email, we'll never spam you because we feel too bad. So you don't have to worry about that. But you could just put a fake email address in as well, I guess. Yeah, so I think we wanted to say a little bit just for a minute or two on what's happened since then, because it's really interesting what's happened actually. Definitely something I wasn't expecting. And that is that joyfully is spreading, much like COVID. I thought about that ahead of time, can you tell, with that heading. So yeah, Joyous until this year looked a lot like what you see on the left, in that reasonably traditional although we had that good product engineering partnership and product looked after customer, the other part of our organization was sales and marketing trying to work together as revenue, which is pretty common. But actually, over the last couple of months or last year, we started talking about this traditional approach, at least for enterprise SaaS, which is where we are. The traditional approach for sales and marketing just does not work anymore. Like, it just doesn't work. The whole marketing qualified leads, even ABM, doesn't really work, for those of you who know what those things mean. And so we decided to take a lot of what we've learned through Joyfully and apply it to the rest of the business as well. And so now we have crews in customer, which is pretty amazing. And the crews look after verticals and territories. But within the crew, they are fully autonomous and able to do everything you need from A to Z, to get someone from having no awareness of Joyous to all the way loved and cared for and really successful using the tool. And that's just been an interesting journey, although we're really early on in the journey. It's just so obvious that it's going to work really well. And everyone in the company now uses the roadmaps, positive, negative roadmaps, so every single part of the business. And actually the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been working really closely with the marketing folks who are fully adopting the methodology to get a new website and new core pitch work done as well. So in terms of execution, it does really feel like a lot of it is reusable just outside of product and engineering as well, which is pretty cool. And I think, is that the point at which we stop talking, please?
It's up to you, but yes, look, we are at the point for Q&A. There's lots of questions in the chat.
Oh, wow.
The team, what we're going to do now is we are going to separate into 2 breakout rooms. So Ruby will be in one, Kevin will be in the other. Feel free to ask your questions in that room, and then we're going to come back together and kind of talk about kind of the key questions or any themes that we've discovered. So we'll do this for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together for that final Q&A and then the wrap up. So I'm just going to put you all in the breakout rooms. Let's just see how it works. Automatically move. All right, here we go. Let's see. That didn't work really, did it? Oh, please. Oh, please. Sorry, that didn't work. I apologize. I need to set this up. Hang on 1 second. I thought I had this figured out. We do practice this, and I apologize. So let me just do into this options. Let's see if we can open all the rooms. All right, assign to 1. Here we go. Should all be in breakout rooms now. Frage, did it work? I see you, Fraser.
Yeah, I think it did. I might just jump in there.
Okay, cool.
XR users and stay within less than 100 employees. So we're really trying to stay at a small organization, and we do not see this scaling to some enormous size, and we want to keep it actually quite small. So yeah, to us that is an anti-pattern. Any other questions? Yeah, just throw them out at me.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed in self-managing teams is a challenge where you encounter a team member who may not be performing to a level where the rest of the team is happy.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yep.
But a lot of self-managing teams then struggle to understand or work out who should deal with that and how it gets dealt with.
Sure, absolutely. So our teams are not self-managing. So that kind of that unified engineering, or same thing with product. So Lisa and I, co-heads of engineering, we manage the engineering team. We are split into crews for individual pieces of work, but the teams do not manage themselves. So anything like that.
So does each crew have a separate manager?
No, so we split the crews amongst the two co-heads. And we kind of
how many direct reports do you then end up with?
So at the moment, we're also kind of pulling in data science at the moment. So each of us has somewhere between 6 and 8 at the moment. Obviously, as we grow, that's going to increase. But we think what's actually manageable is somewhere around 12. So we imagine having about 3 to 4 crews per.
I agree. I think that's quite reasonable.
Yeah.
I think over 12 and you start to struggle. Absolutely.
What constitutes managing team members?
Sure. I mean,
is it the process, the people, what is managing?
I mean, as Lawrence talked about, it's the people side. It's doing people's one-on-ones. It's managing any performance issues or anything like that. It's doing some of the mentoring, although a lot of that also happens in a collaborative fashion. The other thing is we do have that kind of set process. We have that unified way of working. We have those standards set out. So it's making sure that those are continued to be adhered on, that the teams are still kind of pulling in that direction. But what we really find is that since we've been able to get people that really buy into this, there's not actually that much management involved. What we actually like to do is, for the most part, we like to just jump into a crew for a while. We like to actually get our hands in, just be part of the engineering that's actually happening. And our ideal, and what actually can happen, is you get to a point where the management side of it's maybe it's fluctuating between 30 and 60% of your job, and the rest of it you can actually do engineering. You can stay hands-on, and that really helps a lot more with anything else that's coming up.
And we also enable the engineers within the crews to take leadership roles as much as possible. It's like Kevin said, with the mentoring, with the management, like even the project management of, we've taken this piece of work and we're seeing it through, like they will do work to show visibility, to track it through on the board. They'll work with product. So we really like to give people as much opportunity to lead as much as they can, and then we can help grow them and fill in the gaps, as well as take that higher level of people management and one-on-ones.
How do you mitigate the risk of recruiting the wrong person?
It's always a risk. One thing I'd say we are maybe a little pickier than most. But a big one is like what we look for in a person. And I think someone asked in the chat before, where do you find full stack engineers? You don't. Most people aren't full stack engineers. What you look for is you want an engineer that is willing to grow, that wants to learn, that wants to stretch. And that's what we're always looking for, because that's kind of in our environment, that's what's going to work best, is those people that are like, I really want to learn more skills. Even if I'm a senior, maybe I want to get some of that leadership experience. I want to stretch myself in some way. That's what we're really looking for when we're hiring.
And then aligning with the core values, like it's essentially like learning being one of them. If you align and your whole team aligns on like these key fundamentals, you're always going to be pulling in the same direction, and it doesn't matter how much there is to learn and that sort of thing. Those things are really what matters in terms of finding the right people.
So a big organization is anti-pattern for you. How are you going to prevent the organization from overgrowing? A
big part of that is being very deliberate on what we build. A large part of what we're building this year, if you really look at it, is organizational scale. So, we do feedback for customers. We help customers quite a lot with question design and what to ask, because that's what we find makes a huge impact. What kind of feedback you get actually depends on what kind of questions you ask. And at the moment, that's a lot in-house. And so we're building out a way so that the customers can set those up to themselves, and that we have an AI solution that helps them, recommends them, hey, actually, your question.
People who can do all of that.
This meeting is being recorded.
Whoa.
This meeting is being recorded. How on earth
Good
do you get people
question.
who can do all of that? Like, because been doing this for a while, and just the product management piece, the discovery and the research and the customer interviews and all that kind of stuff. That's a big chunk of time. So how do you manage to let people stretch that without them going crazy?
So I think it's actually probably okay to not force everyone to stretch all the way. So like I stretch all the way and another guy stretches all the way. And then there's two others that have almost stretched all the way. And like, if they really don't want to go the rest of the way, that's probably okay. What we do have in all our people is they really want to learn as much as they can, and they don't mind doing what needs to be done. And so between us, we'll have real good skills in at least some of those. So I'm really strong on design and product management, at least really good at the strategy part as well, where my work soulmate I was mentioning, Chris, is really good at the minutiae of product ownership and product management and getting work through the pipe, and has become better by working with me on design and self-learning. We actually got an analyst in, funny enough, to join us, who actually ended up helping with customers a lot, has gone into product management and is now going into product design through our support. So it's about time, but mostly it's about like appetite and desire to learn and grow. And then we just don't overwhelm ourselves with, we're enterprise SaaS, so we don't have hundreds of customers. I mean, I'm not really supposed to talk about financials. We're doing really well as a business, but like, for example, our customer support load, if we get one customer support request a day, it's a lot. We just don't get bugs. We don't do customer feature work. We build a roadmap and we stick to that roadmap. The customers who have bought and installed the product, they believe in the roadmap too. We take them on the journey, so they don't ask us for stuff for the most part. So that means it's not that scary for us. But if you're maybe B2C, or you've got a million internal stakeholders who want a bunch of small and annoying things, that might not be that doable for you. Does that answer your question well enough?
Yes, remove the distractions is the answer. Get rid of all the bollocks part of the role. So no.
And the other thing is, I guess the other important thing is, like, if I just take design as a for instance, we have, if you check out that just a section in the book about design, we've got such a well understood, structured, rigorous, constrained way that we do that it's not a high effort thing to produce. And that's really important. There's a really good design system. It has everything you need. There's an understood way to design a feature. You have a partner and you can do it so fast. So I can design significant features that like normal UI, UX research people will take months to do, and I can do it in days. And I have all that insight and knowledge from working with the customers and having done the research. So no one has to download that into my brain. So I can just be really efficient, insanely efficient. And I think that's important to understand too. Yeah. Is that becoming your experience of things at Run as well, Ro?
I think that for us recruiting, it's finding people who just want to be involved in all those areas. So we ask, when we hire for full stack product, we say, this is what we want. We're looking for people who are interested in research, interested in design, interested in talking to customers, and then saying, you don't need those skills, right? We'll teach you those, we'll work with you. And that's self-selecting. You then get people who want to expand, they want to stretch, and they're the people who apply. So that hasn't been too hard. We've had for us hiring recently, we've had quite a few applicants. No one who does everything, but lots of people who want to learn to do everything, and they want to come with us on that journey as well.
Chris.
Yeah, hey, I guess just continuing on the conversation, I think we may be getting redirected soon, but when you say like stretch all the way, presumably the full stack product isn't coding. So how far sort of
it
deep
goes from sort of
does that
customer,
go?
so the customer roles that you'd normally have, like custom activation, training, that sort of thing, to the traditional product owner, product manager, and so on, to UI, UX research.
But you'd be you'd be expected to be in the squads kind of thing and understanding that sort of journey, or not so much?
You
From the
help
crew.
support the engineers to build a lot
Yeah.
like a designer or a product manager normally would. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, we have
Thank
30
you.
seconds for, there was someone else. Did that person leave already?
Nicholas, I think, was his
Yeah.
name.
Oh, yeah. It was really, I'm not an engineer in any way. I work for a disability organization, but we've created our own form like you have done. But I'm more interested around how you promote the psychological safety and radical candor required to operate in this way where people are touching other people's work on a regular basis.
The timing.
This meeting is being recorded.
The recording is going to be super interesting for this meetup because I joined the different breakout groups, but and I know we were all like in the middle of a great conversation, so hopefully we can get everyone back to the main sesh and get Ruby and Kevin back here. Let's just see.
Back.
Hopefully you're all back. Okay. How did that go? Those sessions? Like I mean, it seemed like there were a lot of questions, a lot of good dialogue, but what were we thinking? Did anyone's question not get answered, or were you in the middle? Feel free.
Yeah, Nicholas on our end had just beautifully finished asking his question as we got kicked out.
Yeah.
I believe, Ruby, the art of comedy is all about timing, right? Isn't that what they say?
That does seem like intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I was just asking Ruby, I'm not full stack and web, none of that means anything to me. I work for a disability equipment organization, but we've created our own variation of Agile. But we are a global company and we do have thousands of people worldwide. But what I was really interested was how you created the psychological safety and radical candor amongst your staff, where people have got their hands on each other's stuff. I mean, cross-functional teams and ways of working are absolutely brilliant. We love them, but it is quite difficult when, oh, well, I was working on that and now you've changed it a bit, or I wasn't quite sure that's how I would do it. So whilst you paint the perfect scenario, I'm assuming it isn't always perfect. So I wonder how you cultivate that radical candor, that feedback element, and that psychological safety within your team.
I mean, it's a really, really, really good question. And we are the company trying to bring open and not anonymous to global organizations, which makes it incredibly important to us. But yeah, we do use our tool, which is an open feedback tool for one thing. And in our organization, we can all see each other's feedback. I would say that the fact that we are kind of an ego-free company is a big thing to us. So we're in the habit of like, someone's not giving you feedback so that it can be them versus you. It's genuinely that we're trying to help each other. We're actually trying to help the person do better or have a better outcome because we're all united on that same thing. So for me, pretty much on a daily basis, someone will give me feedback at Joyous on something I've done. And far more often than not, I'll take that on board. And as a result of that, what I do has a better outcome. And so I'm grateful for it. And I just think that we model that all the time. And when you come into the organization, you get to join meetings where we talk like that. And so you just realize that you can say what you think. And if for some reason someone doesn't agree with you, it's a logical argument, not an egoic thing. And so we just make the decision on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably add a little to that. Like, I guess we care about the best solution, not how we get there. And almost always to get to the best solution, you need iteration, you need feedback, you need change. So we accept that you're going to put out some sort of a solution and everybody's like, I want people to give me feedback. I want this to improve because I know this is just a baseline. I'm not attached to these exact parameters. I want to get something better.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, look, that sounds great. Really good. Cheers.
Nice. Anyone else have any burning questions? Or what was some aha moments, right? So Ruby and Kevin, being in your separate breakout rooms, did anything surprise you? Did any questions surprise you?
Not
I wouldn't say
always.
surprise. Did you answer the scale question, Ruby?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes. I wonder if we gave the same answer.
I have no idea.
We got a scale question, good question, and then full stack product questions on our end. Someone's asking about stand-ups. Yes, we do them.
Good.
We also do retrospectives. We're really, really big on them. And fun ones, not boring ones, always super fun ones. Yeah.
And someone did ask how you keep it fun at Joyous. I think that was early on. I don't know if they got to that in the breakout rooms.
Oh no. Where's Lisa? Is Lisa around?
Is she the fun one?
We're all quite fun, but like it was interesting for me because I joined and like one of the activities that we did for someone's birthday was we all drew a picture of them and then they had to guess who drew the picture of them. So yeah, when I entered, there was a level of fun that I was no longer accustomed to. And sort of like as I settled into it, I was like, what is this? Oh wow, I love this. And so everything is done from like quite a pure perspective. And Lisa is a big part of that, which is why I'm mentioning her name. But yeah, it's kind of like the type of fun that most people would think is a little bit cheesy, but we love it. Yeah.
That's good. So there's another one from Amanda. I heard you saying testing happens after the build and before shipping. Does any other testing happen throughout?
Absolutely. There's kind of testing throughout the build phase. So we have a development environment per crew. They're deploying to that regularly. Products, testing on that. The engineers themselves are testing on it. So it's not like we're getting to the end of a build phase and going, okay, now does this work? There's constant iteration and there's constant checking to make sure, yep, that we're doing this well, this is working. Also, every week we do product engineering check-in where we kind of talk about anything that's been changing over the week, how things have gone, and we demo things. And so there's a lot of eyes on what's happening, how it's progressing, to make sure that we are going in the right direction and things are going well.
Something that I think our engineers are so used to that they don't realize is abnormal is that our engineers are incredibly good at testing their own work. So they're so much so that I think we have like one QA person in the whole company. And that's just to help kind of like with the overarching stuff, which to me was like coming from the places I came from, blew my mind. And I wish that more engineers and had that same mentality that like it's up to you to get your own code, and actually to help the engineers test each other's stuff as well, which I think is really great. So
great.
Yeah. Yeah, so that QA person helps lead the practice of QA as opposed to being the sole QA.
That's really great. Yes, look, QA is a practice, not a job. Yes, we know. Thank you, Anthony. All right. Do you set an appetite, parentheses, time box for the roadmap items you take on?
That's a great question. We don't. We set an estimate and we spend very little time on that estimate. We know that there's one thing that you can be certain of with an estimate is you're going to be wrong. And so we don't spend a ton of time trying to be right about that. We said, okay, here's a general idea of what we think it might be, because you need that for your customers and that kind of thing. And then as that shifts, as that changes, on a weekly basis, we review that. We go, has this blown out? Has it changed? What's going on?
Yeah, and we forecast in quite logically understandable time units. They're called days, not story points. There's no cards or blackjack involved, or Fibonacci codes. It's just like, we think this is going to take a crew a week. And then if it ends up taking longer, next week we'll go, okay, we'll stretch that estimate on a Gantt chart to 2 weeks. And there's one Gantt chart that shows everything that's happening, and anyone can look at it in any given week and it's accurate.
And then when we go like quite off those estimates, that happens, right? Then we do a retrospective. We go, what happened? How did this get there? Also, if it's in a big piece of work and we're noticing things starting to slip, we start those conversations early on. We go, can we cut scope? Can we change what we're doing? If hitting that estimate is a really important thing to do.
We will never ask our engineers, like product never pressures the engineers to deliver to a deadline. I think there's a lot of we're lucky because of the situation when there's almost never a deadline because we're not doing customer driven development, we're roadmap based, but we have our own view of how long we want something to take, ideally. And if we're feeling uncomfortable with how long it's taking, we'll just cut scope. We won't cut quality. And we do that a lot, by the way. We'll stop working on something we designed and said, we're actually ready to move on. It's solved enough.
Nice. Okay, so I'm just conscious of time because we'd like to wrap up at around 7:15. There's a few more questions, but look, guys, we can always reach out to Ruby and Kevin, I'm hoping, right? If you have any more questions, but download the book, it's free. Check out their website. There's a lot of really good resources and tools on there and guidelines, right? So I really like the feedback guidelines and the team guidelines. So definitely check it out. We'll put this video on YouTube after I do some editing. Sorry about the breakout rooms. I didn't realize when I jumped, the recording jumped. So that'll be kind of interesting recording, but we'll see how it goes. But thank you so much, Ruby and Kevin, for joining us today. And thanks for everyone that joined. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Some really exciting stuff. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, if anyone wants to connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message or anything like that, happy to chat to people, happy to know people.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, both. Real cool. Real cool.
Thank you.